You're not even fit to shine her shoes. That's what my mother told me loud enough for the clinking glasses and silverware to stop midair. My father didn't flinch. He nodded like she had spoken the truth of the universe. Emma smirked over her wine, savoring the moment. The room tilted, silence pressing on my chest. For years I'd swallowed words, let their favoritism crush me, but not tonight. I pushed back my chair, my hand steady on the table. 6 words slipped out sharp as a blade. Then ask Emma to pay your bills. The air cracked open, and nobody moved. The silence after my words felt like a vacuum, every candle flame flickering in its own panic. But let me back up, because that night, that dinner, wasn't the beginning. It was the breaking point. To understand why my mother's words cut so deep, why my father's nod still burns in my memory, and why Emma's smirk was sharper than any knife you need to know what came before. My name is Nora. I'm 28 years old, and I've spent most of my life being the invisible child. Not the star, not the disappointment, just the spare. The one who picked up shifts at the hospital while everyone else was clapping for Emma's latest achievement. The one who stayed home when everyone went on family trips. The one whose name never made it into the toast. I work nights in the ICU, 12-hour shifts that leave my bones aching, my hair pulled into a messy bun, my scrubs smelling faintly of disinfectant. I hold people's lives in my hands, literally, and somehow in my family's eyes, that has never been enough. I've walked out of a patient's room after shocking a heart back into rhythm, adrenaline still burning through me, only to come home and hear Emma's got a new job title. You should be proud of her. Emma, my younger sister. 2 years younger, 2 lifetimes easier. She's always been the golden one, the daughter they parade around like a trophy. Every report card of hers was hung on the fridge. Every minor achievement was a reason to book a dinner, buy a cake post, a photo. She grew up knowing applause was waiting for her no matter what she did. I grew up knowing silence. The favoritism wasn't subtle. It was loud, obvious, relentless. I was the one who picked up student loans, juggled tutoring on weekends, and still managed to put money into my parents' account when bills piled up. Emma. Her loans were magically taken care of. Her vacations were fully funded. Her mistakes were smoothed over before she ever felt their weight. I can still smell the roasted chicken from that night, see the expensive wine glasses lined up like a shrine to Emma's success. I had walked in straight from a night shift, my shoulders heavy, my scrubs wrinkled. She walked in, glowing in a dress that probably cost my entire grocery budget. My father leaned forward on every word she spoke. My mother hung on every detail. And me, I sat in the wobbly chair at the end of the table, the one nobody else wanted. That's the stage we were on, Emma as the star, me as the understudy no one noticed, until I decided to stop playing my part. It started small, the kind of slights you almost convince yourself to ignore. A look held too long a compliment withheld a casual dismissal disguised as a joke. But then came the blows you couldn't ignore, the kind that leave bruises you can't see. 2 weeks after that dinner, I was on my lunch break at the hospital sitting in the staff lounge with stale coffee and the hum of vending machines, when I opened Instagram. The screen lit up with a photo that didn't feel real. At first, my parents, Emma and her boyfriend, standing under palm trees, the ocean glowing behind them. Big smiles, sunglasses matching resort cocktails with little umbrellas. The caption read, "Family getaway, just what we needed." My thumb hovered over the phone numb. Nobody had said a word to me about a trip. Not a hint, not a question if I could join. My heart pounded as I scrolled Emma building sandcastles, my dad snorkeling, my mom holding Emma's hand on a sunset walk. I wasn't just missing from the photos. I was erased. I called my mother, my voice shaking. "You're in Hawaii." "Oh, Nora." She sighed like I'd caught her in a minor lie. "We didn't think you could get time off work. You're always so busy with those night shifts. You didn't even ask," I whispered. It was last minute. Emma needed to decompress after starting her new job. "You understand?" I hung up before the heat in my chest turned into tears. Hours later, Emma texted, "Sorry, thought you knew. You're always working anyway. Didn't think you'd want to come." I wasn't angry, I was gutted. There's a difference. And yet the real humiliation came weeks later at her birthday. They rented out the most expensive restaurant in town, crystal chandeliers, velvet chairs, a guest list of 50 people all there to celebrate Emma, the rising star. I arrived straight from a 12-hour shift, hair pinned back, my nicest dress still looking cheap next to rows of designer gowns. Mom stood at the center of the room, glass raised. A toast to our Emma. She's always had the talent, the drive, the future. Some people are just born to succeed. The room erupted with applause. Emma glowed like she was on stage, eating up every clap. Then Mrs. Chen, one of Mom's friends, leaned over to me and asked, "And what do you do?" "Nora." Before I could open my mouth, Dad laughed. She's still figuring things out, works at the hospital, but Emma's the one really going places. My cheeks burned. I worked in the ICU saving lives, making more money than Emma had ever touched. But in that room, I was nothing more than the blurry background to her spotlight. I smiled tightly, swallowed my rage, and clinked my glass. But something inside me snapped that night. Quietly. Silently. And I knew this wasn't just favoritism anymore. This was war dressed as family. The birthday humiliation could have been the worst of it. But life has a way of pulling the rug twice when you're already on the floor. A week later, I was helping my mother sort through a stack of bills at her kitchen table. The house smelled faintly of lemon cleaner, the blinds half closed. She handed me envelopes absent-mindedly, her focus elsewhere, and I started making neat piles: utilities, credit cards, mortgage statements. Then I saw it. Student loan bills. Emma's name printed in bold across the top. Every single one stamped, paid in full. My chest tightened as I shuffled through them. $45,000 in debt gone. My hands trembled as I flipped to the payment history. The money hadn't come from Emma. It hadn't come from my parents' income either. The account numbers matched the same bank account where I'd been depositing money every month for the mortgage. My voice cracked when I confronted her. "You used my money. You used my money to pay her loans." She didn't look ashamed. She didn't even look up. Emma needs to focus on her career growth. She can't be weighed down by debt right now. You have a stable job. You can handle responsibility. I've been drowning in my own loans, I said, my throat raw, working nights, weekends, tutoring every spare shift, and you use my mortgage payments for Emma. Nora, she said flatly, "Don't be selfish. Family helps family. Emma's success benefits us all." I couldn't breathe. The walls felt smaller, the air heavier. All this time I thought I was keeping a roof over their heads. Instead, I had been bankrolling Emma's entire lifestyle while breaking myself in half. The next day at work, I sat in the break room staring at the numbers I'd scrawled on a legal pad. That's when Jennifer, the charge nurse, slid into the chair across from me. She didn't sugarcoat. She never did. "You're literally paying for her life while they treat you like a failure," she said, tapping the pad. "This isn't family support, Nora. This is financial abuse." She helped me run the math. Over 2 years, I had funneled $47,000 into that house. Not just the mortgage, but Emma's loans, her car payments, even her credit cards. The numbers didn't lie. They sat there cold and merciless, staring back at me like proof of a crime. Something hardened in me that day, the kind of resolve that comes when you've been stripped bare when there's nothing left to lose. I stopped paying the mortgage and waited for the storm I knew was coming. The calls started within a week. First it was my mother, her voice tight brittle. "Nora, the bank called. The mortgage payment's late. Is something wrong with your account?" Then my father, angrier. "This family depends on you. Don't you dare let us down." Even Emma called for once, her voice tinged with worry. "Nora, Mom's freaking out. Just make the payment, okay? You know I can't handle this kind of stress right now." Stress. The word made me laugh out loud, bitter and sharp. I had been carrying their stress on my back for years, and they never even noticed. Now with one missed payment, they were unraveling. That was when I said it, calmly, even kindly. "Let's have dinner. Saturday night. Let's talk about financial contributions." They agreed immediately, probably imagining they could guilt me back into line. They thought I was scared. They thought I was weak. They didn't know I had spent the last 2 weeks building my arsenal. Saturday came with the same choreography my family had always practiced. My mother cooked an elaborate meal, roast beef, mashed potatoes, the works, thinking food could soften me. My father uncorked a bottle of wine, trying to set the mood, like this was a celebration instead of an intervention. Emma swept in late, her diamond engagement ring, flashing ready to announce more wedding plans. I sat down quietly, folder in my bag, heart steady for the first time in months. Dinner went as expected. They laughed, they toasted. They pretended everything was fine until my father cleared his throat and began the lecture. Nora, we need to talk about responsibility, family obligations. You can't just stop paying because you're having some emotional crisis. My mother leaned in, her tone sharp. This family depends on you. Emma's building her future, and we all need to sacrifice so she can succeed. Emma nodded, smug and certain, like she was the queen in some play we were all forced to perform in. Then my mother looked at me with that same cold sneer, the same words she'd spit weeks before. You'll never be as good as your sister. I pushed back my chair, slow and steady, my hands calm on the table. Then ask Emma to pay your bills. Silence. You could hear the clock ticking in the hallway. I reached into my bag, pulled out the thick folder, and laid it on the table. Page after page landed in front of them with a soft thud that echoed louder than any shout. I've paid $47,000 into this family. Over the last 2 years, I said, my voice clear, unwavering. Your mortgage, Emma's student loans, her car payment, even her credit card bills when she overspent. Every dollar documented, every lie exposed. Emma's face went pale. She picked up one of the statements, her hand-trembling eyes darting over the numbers. Mom, Dad, I didn't know. I thought you were helping me. Of course she didn't know. That was the cruelty of it. They'd let her believe she was the golden child, the success story, while I funded her entire life. My father's face flushed crimson. He snatched a page, scanning it like he could will the numbers to change. This doesn't mean anything. We're family. Families help each other. No, I said, slamming my palm lightly against the papers. This isn't family. This is theft dressed up as love. My mother started to speak, excuses tumbling from her mouth, but I cut her off. You told me I'd never be as good as Emma. You said I wasn't fit to shine her shoes, yet it's been my money keeping this house standing. My money paying her debt. My money covering your mistakes. Tell me who's carrying who. The room went dead still. Emma was crying openly now, mascara streaking her cheeks, staring at the truth in black and white. My father's shoulders sagged. My mother's face twisted, searching for control she no longer had. You wanted a successful daughter, I said, my voice shaking now, but not from fear, from fury, from freedom. Well, here she is, the nurse who makes $89,000 a year, the woman who's been accepted into a nurse practitioner program, who's about to break 6 figures. You didn't want to see it. You wanted Emma to be the star, but you built her spotlight on my back. Nobody spoke. The silence was suffocating. I gathered the papers back into my folder, each page sliding into place like a final nail in their coffin. Then I stood, pushing my chair back without another word. The mortgage stops now, I said, my voice calm, final. Emma can pay her own bills, and so can you. I walked to the door, my footsteps steady each one, pulling me further from years of invisibility. Behind me, I heard Emma sob. My father mutter my mother's sharp inhale like she was drowning. But I didn't turn back. Not this time. When the door shut behind me, it was the loudest sound of my life. I didn't go back after that night. Not for Sunday dinners. Not for birthdays. Not even when Emma tried calling me 3 days later. Her voice cracking through the voicemail. Please, Nora, can we just talk? I moved to another city within 2 weeks. The hospital there welcomed me with open arms, offering a nurse practitioner position and a salary I'd only dreamed of before, $120,000 a year. For the first time, I was valued for my skill. my experience, my dedication not measured against someone else's reflection. Meanwhile, back at home, the cracks I'd predicted widened fast. Without my payments, the mortgage slipped behind. 6 months later, the house went into foreclosure. My parents, who once sat so high on their throne of judgment, were forced to downsize to face the kind of struggles they'd always dumped onto me. Emma's world collapsed too. Her engagement fell apart when her fiancé realized the vacations, the lifestyle, the glow he thought was hers had all been propped up by me. The moment the money disappeared, so did he. She called me again, then sobbing, begging for help. But I didn't answer. Because here's the truth, I was never the weak one. I was never the failure. I was the foundation. And once I pulled that foundation away, the castle they built on lies came crashing down. Walking away didn't hurt the way I thought it would. For years, their silence had been a knife. But this new silence, the silence of finally being free, wasn't painful. It was peaceful. I built a new life surrounded by colleagues who respected me, friends who saw me people who didn't need me to prove my worth with receipts, and I finally understood success isn't about being chosen, praised, or paraded. Success is knowing your own value and never letting anyone make you pay to prove it. Sometimes the greatest act of strength is walking away. I thought I needed their approval to matter, but what I really needed was my own respect. I gave everything, my money, my energy, my loyalty, only to be told I'd never measure up. But the day I stopped paying for their dreams and started investing in mine was the day I finally won. If you've ever felt like the invisible one in your family, know this: you are not alone. Your worth doesn't come from their praise, it comes from you. Tell me in the comments, have you ever had to choose between family loyalty and your own self-worth? And don't forget to subscribe. More stories are coming.
I used to believe love could silence any insult, that if your heart was loud enough, no one else's opinion could drown it out. But that night at an Italian restaurant with white tablecloths and crystal glasses, I learned something that would change my life. Sometimes love isn't quiet, it's complicit. My name is Barbara Mack. I'm 29, and this story begins 6 months before my relationship with Matthew ended, though I didn't know it then. The restaurant smelled of basil and wine. It was our 3rd anniversary, and I'd spent 2 weeks of overtime just to book this place. Matthew sat across from me, looking like he'd stepped out of a corporate catalog, neat-pressed and effortlessly confident. I loved that about him. Or maybe I just loved the way his presence made the world take me more seriously. We were laughing over our shared appetizer when a shadow fell across the table. Matthew, a deep, booming voice called out. Matthew's smile faltered for a split second before he stood up. "Dad, you made it." David Matthews' father was the kind of man who filled a room without needing to raise his voice. Silver hair, immaculate suit, and that unnerving calm of someone used to watching people scramble to impress him. He leaned in to kiss my cheek. His cologne smelled expensive and faintly metallic. "Barbara," he said with a smile that didn't touch his eyes, "you look lovely. I see you've done well for yourself, at least in presentation." I laughed politely, though something cold settled in my stomach. Matthew didn't say a word. He just gestured for the waiter to add another chair. Dinner was an interrogation disguised as small talk. David asked about my work project management for a mid-sized tech firm. "Oh, interesting," he said, swirling his Pinot. "And what's the next step from there? You don't plan to stay in a position like that forever, do you?" I smiled tightly. "I'm actually up for promotion soon. It's a big opportunity." He raised an eyebrow. Promotion. To what, senior project manager? The way he said senior sounded like settling. Matthew kept his eyes on his plate. Then David turned to his son. "You remember Charlotte Hayes, don't you? The investment partner's daughter. She just opened that design firm downtown, already pulling in 7 figures. Bright girl." I felt the words like paper cuts, small, sharp, designed to sting later. I waited for Matthew to say something, anything. He didn't. Instead, he reached for his wine. "She's talented," he murmured. The silence that followed was suffocating. The waiter came by, asked if we wanted dessert. I shook my head. On the ride home, I kept replaying the dinner in my head. David's smirk. Matthew's silence. The city lights blurred through the window like gold smudges. Finally, I said softly, "You could have said something." Matthew sighed, tapping the steering wheel. "He's just old-fashioned. You know how he is. Old-fashioned, I repeated. He basically said my job isn't good enough in front of you. He gave a half smile that didn't reach his eyes. You're overreacting, Elle. He meant well. That was the first time he called me Elle with that tone not affectionate but dismissive, like I was being childish. I turned to the window, hiding the heat rising behind my eyes. I wanted to shout, to demand that he see what his silence had done, but instead I just whispered, I thought you were proud of me. He said nothing. The rest of the drive was quiet except for the soft hum of tires on asphalt, a sound that felt suddenly unbearable. That night I couldn't sleep. Matthew was snoring beside me, peaceful, untouched by the tension he'd let bloom between us. I stared at the ceiling, tracing invisible cracks with my eyes. In that silence, I remembered David's words, some people build, others marry smart. At the time, I thought he was just talking about ambition. Now I realize he was setting the stage not for Matthew's success, but for my replacement. Because love, when measured by wealth, becomes a transaction. And that dinner, that was my receipt. The next morning, Matthew kissed me goodbye as if nothing had happened. Dinner with Dad next week, he said, casually grabbing his keys. I smiled mechanically. Sure. But as the door shut, I felt a strange clarity settle over me. Not anger, not heartbreak, just a faint tremor of recognition. That was the first crack, the kind you can't see until the light hits it just right. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. There's a kind of silence that feels like a countdown. You can sense something ending long before it's spoken. That's what those last weeks with Matthew felt like, a slow erasure. The laughter got shorter, the eye contact rarer, the warmth quieter. I kept telling myself it was stress or work, or maybe the weather. But the truth was simpler. He was already halfway out the door. I just hadn't caught him moving yet. It was a Tuesday night, one of those days that starts ordinary and ends in ruins. I came home early, wanting to surprise him. I cooked spaghetti, his favorite, with that overpriced sauce he liked. Our tiny apartment smelled of garlic and wine. I even opened a bottle of red, letting it breathe on the counter like a peace offering. By 7, he still wasn't home. By 8, my phone buzzed. Matthew at Dad's. Won't be long. That text hit differently now. At Dad's had started to mean somewhere I don't belong. I ate alone, one forkful at a time, pretending it was fine. I told myself, you're being silly. He loves you. But love doesn't feel like waiting for someone who's already left you emotionally. He came in close to 10. The door clicked open, slow, careful, like he didn't want to wake a stranger. His face was pale, his tie slightly loose. I could tell he'd been somewhere expensive. His cologne clung too perfectly to be casual. Hey, I said softly. He looked at me like he'd forgotten I lived there. Hey, we need to talk. The way he said it made my stomach twist. Every woman knows that tone, the one that sounds like a doctor about to deliver bad news. I turned off the stove even though the food was already cold. Okay, I said, sitting on the couch. Talk. He didn't sit down. He paced, rubbing his forehead like this conversation was an inconvenience. Barbara, I love you, he began. The word love came out thin, weightless. But love isn't always enough, is it? My chest went cold. What's that supposed to mean? He exhaled. Dad and I were talking. Of course they were. They always were. He made me see things clearly. About our future. Your potential. He said it gently, but it still sliced deep. My potential, I repeated, trying to keep my voice steady. Matthew, what are you talking about? I'm up for promotion. You know that. He gave that half smile again, the one that felt like pity wearing politeness. Right. Promotion. And then what? Another few years to senior level. A mortgage. 2 weeks vacation a year. You really see that as living? I blinked. That's called building a life, Matthew. He stopped pacing, his expression hardened. I don't want to build, Barbara. I want to arrive. The words landed like a slap. For a moment, I just stared at him, waiting for the punchline that never came. He went on, voice soft, but cruel in its certainty. You're wonderful, really, but I can't keep pretending we're on the same path. I need someone who's already there, someone who fits. I felt the tears pressing behind my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. Fits what your father's vision board. He flinched just slightly. You're being unfair. No, I said quietly. I'm finally being realistic. He looked at me like I'd disappointed him by not making this easier. I'll stay at Dad's for a few days, he said, already walking toward the bedroom. We'll figure out logistics later. I nodded numbly. Sure. He froze in the doorway, maybe expecting me to cry or beg the dramatic scene that would soothe his guilt. But I didn't. I just stood there, hands still on the edge of the table, staring at the 2 untouched plates of spaghetti. When the door closed, the sound didn't echo. It thudded softly like the world sealing shut. That night I sat on the floor beside the cold food knees pulled to my chest. I didn't cry. Not then. I just kept thinking about all the ways he'd rehearsed that speech, the pauses, the careful phrasing, the absence of real feeling. Love wasn't ending. It had been negotiated out of existence. I remember whispering into the empty room, "Was I ever enough for you, or was I just an investment you didn't believe in?" The silence answered for him. I left the lights on until morning. Not because I was scared of the dark, but because I needed to see the place one last time, the home we built from shared dreams now reduced to furniture and dust. That was the night love turned into a transaction, and I realized I'd been the unpaid balance all along. Grief doesn't always look like crying. Sometimes it looks like bubble wrap cardboard boxes and a woman taping up her past while the person she built her life around showers in the next room. For 48 hours after that conversation, Matthew and I became strangers occupying the same space. He avoided me. I avoided breaking. Every sound the coffee maker dripping the creak of the floorboards felt like it was reminding me that I used to belong here. But I wasn't angry. Not yet. I was methodical, detached, like an archaeologist cataloging the ruins of something once beautiful. I started with the photos. 3 years' worth of memories, holidays, weekend trips, lazy mornings. I spread them on the living room floor and stared. Every smile looked different now. Every hug rehearsed. I took only the ones that were mine alone. My graduation, my mom's birthday, a solo trip before I met him. The rest are US. I stacked neatly in a shoebox and left it on the counter. I didn't tear them up. That would have meant I still cared. The kitchen came next. The wine glasses his father gave us for Christmas, I left those. The mug he bought me that said, "Boss lady," I took that. Petty maybe. But sometimes survival needs souvenirs. When I called Mara, my best friend, she didn't say "I told you so." She just asked, "Do you want me to come over?" "No," I said quietly, sealing another box. "I need to do this myself." She paused, then promised me something. "What?" "When you walk out that door, don't take any ghosts with you." I laughed, but it came out brittle. "I'll try." Matthew appeared briefly while I was packing clothes. He leaned against the doorframe tie, loosened, pretending to check his phone. "You don't have to rush," he said. "We can figure out." "I'm not rushing," I interrupted, folding the last of my sweaters. "I'm finishing." He blinked, surprised by my tone. I think he expected tears or pleading. Instead, he found a woman who had finally stopped waiting for him to change. His jaw tightened. "Barbara, come on, don't be dramatic." I zipped my suitcase. "You left me 3 days ago, Matthew. I'm just catching up." He didn't reply. He just turned and walked out. The sound of his footsteps faded down the hall light and confident, like someone certain they'd never trip. That night, I slept on the couch. The apartment was too quiet. Even the refrigerator hum felt intrusive. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering if peace always came with this kind of ache. By morning, my numbness had hardened into clarity. I made coffee, poured 2 cups out of habit, then poured one down the sink. When the buzzer rang, I assumed it was Mara. But when I opened the door, David stood there. Matthew's father, perfectly pressed, suit-cold politeness radiating off him. "Barbara," he greeted smoothly. "Matthew told me you're moving out. It's for the best, really. You'll find someone more suited to your lifestyle." I didn't answer. I just stared at him, letting the words hang between us. He waited, expecting a reaction, embarrassment, maybe an apology. He got neither. Finally, I smiled small tight. "You're right. I will." For the first time, I saw confusion flicker across his face. He wasn't used to women agreeing with his verdicts so calmly. He cleared his throat, stepping aside. "Take care, then." "Oh, I plan to," I said, locking the door behind me. Outside, the morning sun was sharp and blinding. The cab driver helped load my suitcases into the trunk, and as I slid into the back seat, I looked up at the apartment windows one last time. 3 years of my life. Birthdays, fights, apologies, dreams, all compressed into those walls. I felt a hollow ache in my chest, but also something lighter beneath it. Relief. I whispered almost to myself, "Goodbye." As the car pulled away, I didn't cry. I just watched the building shrink in the rearview mirror until it was gone. Maybe I hadn't escaped heartbreak, just rewritten it. Because heartbreak, when stripped of illusion, is just truth finally saying, "Now it's my turn to speak." By the time the city skyline came into view, I knew what that apartment had really been. Not a home. A museum filled with relics of who I'd been trying to be, for someone who never really saw me. And I was done curating it. The first night in my new apartment, I didn't unpack. I just sat on the floor, surrounded by boxes, the air thick with dust and unfamiliar quiet. The walls were bare, the light harsh. But for the first time in months, I could breathe without waiting for someone else's approval to fill the silence. I slept on a borrowed mattress wrapped in a blanket that smelled faintly of detergent and freedom. It wasn't peace yet, but it was a start. The mornings came heavy at first. No text from Matthew, no one asking if I'd eaten, no soft voice telling me I worked too hard. Just the hum of the fridge, the tapping of my own spoon in my own cup. The kind of loneliness that felt clean like an empty plate after the storm. I went to work because not going would have meant thinking, and thinking was dangerous territory. At the office, everyone pretended not to notice my hollow smile. "Rough week," my boss asked once. "Just getting started," I replied. He nodded approvingly, not realizing I meant it in more ways than one. The days blurred. Emails, deadlines, long commutes. But in the evenings, I found something strange growing beneath the numbness discipline. I stayed late. I volunteered for projects everyone else avoided. I read every leadership manual and took every online course that crossed my feed. It wasn't just distraction, it was reconstruction. I remember one night staring at a half-finished presentation at 2 a.m., whispering to myself, if he thought my potential was limited, then I'll make sure it terrifies him next time he hears my name. It wasn't revenge, it was reclamation. Weekends used to mean brunch with Matthew's friends, all manicured nails and easy laughter. Now they meant coffee spreadsheets and the soft hum of my laptop. Mara would call, sometimes worried. "Barbara, you have to rest," she'd say. Rest from what I'd answer. "I'm finally awake." She stopped arguing after that. Months passed. I got my promotion senior project manager, and with it came a salary bump that felt like oxygen. But even that wasn't enough. I wanted more, not to prove anything to them, but to the version of me who used to whisper, "Please love me," into the dark. So I built something that was mine. A consulting business. Small, at first weekend clients, late-night proposals, half-finished ideas written on napkins. But slowly it took shape. My first client came from a referral, then another. Word spread apparently, I was good at making order out of chaos. I'd laugh sometimes thinking, if only Matthew could see how much potential limited looks like when it's free. Through the grapevine, I started hearing things. Matthew was dating someone new, Charlotte Hayes. The investment partner's daughter David had mentioned that night at dinner. Of course. They looked perfect together in photos, polished, golden, predictable. He'd finally arrived. Mara sent me a screenshot once, her text beneath it. "Do you want me to delete this for you?" I smiled. No need. It's just data. Because by then, I'd stopped comparing. Their story wasn't my heartbreak anymore. It was my lesson plan. One Sunday evening, I found myself on the balcony, city lights glittering below. I was barefoot, holding a mug of tea, feeling the quiet hum of a life that was finally mine. And I thought of something David had said that night. Some people build, others marry smart. He meant it as a warning. But he was right, I was a builder. And the foundation I was pouring now didn't need anyone else's approval. The funny thing about ruin is that it gives you new ground, the kind untouched by expectation, the kind solid enough to hold your own name. And though I didn't know it yet, everything I was building, every late night, every risk, every decision made alone, was laying the bricks for the moment I'd stop remembering him at all. Because healing isn't forgetting, it's outgrowing. And somewhere between exhaustion and quiet triumph, I realized I wasn't rebuilding what I lost. I was creating what I deserved. 2 years. That's how long it took for the silence between me and Matthew to stop echoing, long enough for the smell of his cologne to fade from memory, for his father's voice to turn from thunder to static. By then my life had shape again, not glittering, not loud, but mine. I worked from a sleek little office downtown, sunlight pooling over the stacks of client files. The consulting firm I'd started out of desperation had become something solid, something respected. I had employees now, a schedule, a name people trusted. There was a quiet joy in watching the woman I'd become. Not a phoenix rising from ashes that's too dramatic. More like a tree growing through concrete, slow, stubborn, unstoppable. The first sign of their downfall came in the form of a message from Mara one afternoon. "Mara, you sitting down, me depends. Why Mara David's firm just collapsed. Insider trading scandal. Matthew's family lost everything." I stared at my phone. For a long time, I didn't move. There was no jolt of vindication, no evil grin, just quiet. Like the universe had just finished an equation I'd stopped solving years ago. I texted back, "That's unfortunate." Mara replied with 3 dots, then, "You're impossible." Later that night, I poured myself a glass of wine and sat by the window watching the city lights. Somewhere out there, Matthew was probably sitting in a house, half-packed in panic, his father calling lawyers, his mother pretending not to cry. And for the first time, I didn't picture them as villains, just people who'd mistaken wealth for weatherproofing. Because when storms come, they don't check your bank balance before tearing your roof off. A few weeks later, I got the first message. Unknown number. "Barbara, it's Matthew. I heard you're doing really well. I'm happy for you. Can we talk?" I stared at the text until my screen dimmed. Then I deleted it. 2 days later, another message, a voicemail this time. I didn't even have to press play to know who it was. David's voice, smooth, controlled, but now carrying something I'd never heard before need. "Barbara, dear, we've had our differences, but family is family, isn't it? You were always the grounded one. We could use someone stable right now. Let's reconnect." Stable. That word used to sting. Now it made me laugh out loud. Soft, incredulous laughter that filled the quiet apartment like music. Mara came over that weekend with takeout. When I told her about the messages, she nearly dropped her noodles. "You're joking. They actually reached out." "Multiple times," I said. "And I deleted them." She grinned. "That's my girl." But I just smiled faintly, swirling my tea. "It's strange," I said. "I thought I'd feel triumphant, but I don't. I just feel done." One morning, I opened my inbox to find an email with no subject line from Matthew. "Barbara, I made a mistake. You were right about everything. I thought I wanted more, but I didn't realize what I already had. I've lost everything, my job, my place, my peace. I don't expect forgiveness, but I'd like a chance to talk." My cursor hovered over reply for a long time, but there was nothing to say. We weren't two people reconnecting. We were two versions of time, one that had healed and one that hadn't. I clicked delete, and this time I didn't even hesitate. That night I stood on my balcony again. The air smelled like rain and new beginnings. Somewhere below, traffic moved like veins of light through the city. I thought about David's empire collapsing about Matthew's apologies. And then I thought about myself at 29 crying over cold spaghetti, begging for scraps of validation. That woman was gone, not destroyed, evolved. I raised my glass quietly as if toasting an invisible truth. To the lesson that the life you lose trying to please someone else isn't a tragedy, it's tuition. Because every heartbreak teaches you the same thing, that the most dangerous kind of love is the one that makes you forget your own worth. And I'd never forget mine again. 2 years after the messages stopped, I thought the chapter had finally closed. Matthew and his father had vanished from my world like a storm that leaves only damp silence behind. I'd moved on not just from them, but from the woman who once needed their approval to feel real. And then one crisp autumn evening, the past decided to find me again. It was a charity gala downtown, one of those glittering events where the chandeliers outshine the guests. I wasn't there for the spectacle. I was there because Ethan, my partner, had been one of the keynote sponsors. Ethan was everything Matthew never was: calm, grounded, quietly sure of himself. He didn't fill silence with noise. He filled it with peace. When he introduced me that night, "This is Barbara, my better half," his voice carried warmth, not ownership. I remember thinking how easy it was to breathe next to him. No performance, no pretending, just ease. We were standing near the stage when I heard a familiar voice behind me. "Barbara." I turned and there he was, Matthew. Older, thinner, but still carrying that faint arrogance now cracked around the edges. His expensive suit didn't fit quite right anymore. His eyes had that restless flicker of someone who'd lost the map but was still pretending to lead. "Matthew," I said, steady, almost surprised by my own calm. He smiled awkwardly. "You look incredible." His gaze darted to Ethan beside me, then back. "Who's this?" "Ethan," I said simply. "A friend." It wasn't a lie. He was my friend, the kind who built instead of competed. Ethan extended a hand politely. "Nice to meet you." Matthew shook it, his expression tightening. I could feel the comparison happening in his head, his ruin against Ethan's quiet composure. When Ethan excused himself to greet someone, Matthew seized the moment. "Barbara, I've been trying to reach you for a long time." "I know," I said. He swallowed, glancing around the glittering room. Everything fell apart. My dad, the business, it's all gone. And Charlotte. He stopped, bitterness creeping in. "She left when the money did." I nodded. "That sounds hard." He looked at me, desperate now. "I made mistakes. I listened to the wrong people. You have to believe me. I don't have to believe anything," I interrupted softly. "You already showed me who you are." He flinched, the words landing heavier than I expected. I was scared, he said. I thought success meant security. My dad made me think love had to look like status. And now I asked. He hesitated. Now I know I was wrong. You were what mattered. You always were. For a second, I just looked at him. The man I'd once planned a future with. The man who'd measured my worth and potential and found me lacking. And I felt nothing. Not anger, not nostalgia, not even pity. Just distance, like watching an old film of a life I'd outgrown. There's no going back, Matthew, I said quietly. We don't belong to each other anymore. He stepped closer. Please, just coffee, to talk, for old time's sake. I almost smiled. There are no old times, only lessons. He blinked. So that's it. You're just done. I nodded. You were right about me once, you know. He frowned. What do you mean? You said my potential was limited. I smiled, then small but certain. You were right because I kept measuring it through your eyes. Once I stopped doing that, I became limitless. His mouth opened, but no words came. Ethan returned at that moment, handing me a glass of champagne. Everything all right? Perfect, I said, taking his hand. Matthew stood there frozen amid the laughter and music, a ghost in the wrong story. As Ethan and I walked away, I felt the weight of something lift, not bitterness, not revenge, just release. I didn't need Matthew to see how far I'd come, but he did, and that was enough. Later that night, as we stepped outside, the city air felt cool and clean. Ethan brushed a strand of hair from my face. You okay? I smiled. Better than okay. Old flame, he asked gently. Old lesson, I corrected. He laughed softly, intertwining his fingers with mine. Remind me never to underestimate you. Too late, I said with a grin. As we walked to the car, I glanced back once through the glass doors. Matthew was still inside, standing alone, the chandeliers flickering above him like judgmental stars. And for the first time, I didn't feel small when I thought of him. I felt infinite. Because sometimes closure isn't an ending. It's a mirror showing you how much you've grown since you last looked back. It's strange how endings rarely look like endings. They don't explode. They dissolve quietly, mercifully, until one day you realize the person you once ached for hasn't crossed your mind in months. That's what peace felt like for me. Not triumph, not revenge, just the steady stillness of finally being free. It's been 3 years since that night at the gala. My consulting firm has grown into something I used to only daydream about during long office shifts. We have 12 employees now, a downtown workspace filled with laughter coffee cups, and the soft chaos of people who believe in what they're building. Every Friday, I stand by the big glass window overlooking the city and think I made this. Not to prove anyone wrong, but to honor the woman who refused to stay small. I still remember her, the one who cooked spaghetti for a man who was already planning to leave the one who begged for love she'd already earned. The one who thought enough was something she had to become. I wish I could tell her that she was never lacking, only misplaced. Sometimes new clients find me through old networks. One afternoon, my assistant forwarded me an inquiry. Hi, Barbara. I was referred by a former colleague of yours, Matthew Matthews. He said you're the best. I read it twice, then smiled. Not a cruel smile, not even a proud one. Just that quiet kind you get when life hands you perfect irony, wrapped in professionalism. I replied simply, thank you for reaching out. I'd be happy to discuss your project. Because growth doesn't mean burning bridges. It means you can cross them without shaking. Outside of work, life became beautifully ordinary. Ethan and I moved in together, a home with sunlight in every room and a balcony covered in wild plants I keep forgetting to water. He doesn't complete me. He compliments me. And that's what love should feel like, not rescue, but resonance. Sometimes over coffee, he'll tease me about my obsession with overworking. I tell him it's muscle memory. Once you rebuild yourself from nothing, you never forget how to keep the walls steady. He just smiles, kisses my forehead, and says, you don't have to hold the ceiling up alone anymore. And I believe him. A few weeks ago, I got a message request on social media. The profile picture was blank. The name was familiar. Matthew. No text, just a single line, I'm glad you're happy. I'm sorry I wasn't brave enough to see you when it mattered. I didn't reply. Not out of anger, but because forgiveness doesn't always need to be spoken. Sometimes silence is the loudest form of peace. I archived the message, closed the app, and went back to watering my plants. If someone asked me today what I learned from all of it, I'd say this. Love can break you, but self-respect, once you find it, will rebuild you stronger than any apology ever could. People like David and Matthew taught me something without meaning to. That being enough isn't about fitting someone else's standard. It's about outgrowing the need to meet it. Now, when I look in the mirror, I don't see the woman who lost everything. I see the woman who started over brick by brick, breath by breath. And every morning when I open my office door, I whisper a small prayer of gratitude for the heartbreak that became the blueprint. Because without it, I'd still be waiting for permission to shine. Final narration. Soft cinematic tone. He taught me that love measured in wealth is a transaction. He taught me that silence can be a cage. But I taught myself something greater, that walking away isn't weakness. It's how you reclaim your name. The camera lingers on Barbara, closing her laptop, turning off the office lights, and stepping into the glow of the evening city. The air outside is quiet, and for the first time in years, she doesn't look back. My name is Alexis Markley. I'm 33 years old, and until a few months ago, I thought I was living the kind of steady, ordinary marriage people envy in quiet ways. We had a rhythm Sunday takeout midweek arguments about the laundry Friday night comfort food. Nothing extraordinary. But maybe that's the problem. Ordinary can feel invisible until it vanishes. It started with a brochure. Stanley had found it online, The Pulse Collective, a weekend for the expanding soul. He said it with a joking grin over breakfast, stirring his coffee. Alexis, they say people come back completely transformed. I laughed. Transformed how? Like taxidermy. He didn't laugh back. That should have been my first clue. The morning he left, he was oddly detached, almost vibrating with excitement. He hugged me quick, no real warmth in it, and said, "I'll see you Sunday night. Don't wait up." I asked him to text me when he landed. He said he would. He didn't. I tried not to overthink it. Stanley was a software designer, logical to the bone. He was just stressed, maybe burned out. But by Sunday, that quiet voice in my head started whispering something darker. At the arrivals gate, I searched the crowd until I saw him, same man, different energy. His eyes looked charged, like he'd swallowed lightning. He wore a linen shirt that didn't look like him at all, loose, cream-colored, unbuttoned too far. He hugged me like I was a polite acquaintance. How was it, I asked. He smiled dreamily. Transformative, Alexis. Just transformative. The drive home was mostly silence, broken by the soft ping of his phone. A group chat lit his screen, the Pulse family. Every few seconds, another ping, another burst of emojis. When we got home, I ordered Thai like always. He waved it off. I'm fasting for cellular clarity. Instead, he spent 2 hours soaking in the tub with Epsom salts and eucalyptus oil, his phone propped on the rim, thumbs flying. I sat alone at the kitchen counter, picking at cold noodles, listening to the sound of bathwater sloshing behind the closed door. Something about the silence felt heavy. Like a presence had moved in with him, something that didn't include me. By Thursday, I tried to reach for normal. I made spaghetti carbonara, his favorite. The smell of garlic and pancetta filled the apartment, and for a second, I let myself believe the scent might bring him back to earth. He walked in, sniffed the air, and frowned. "You know, Alexis," he said, "animal products lower your vibrational frequency." I blinked. "You mean bacon?" He gave a gentle smile that somehow felt cruel. Exactly. That was the last time he looked at me like a person instead of a problem. Friday night, he came home early carrying a bundle of sage. He lit it without asking, the smoke curling through the room, erasing the smell of dinner of us. He gestured for me to sit. His voice was soft, careful. I've realized something fundamental about myself. My stomach dropped. He took a deep breath, eyes shining. I'm polyamorous. The words hung there absurd, what I whispered. It's simple. Love doesn't divide. It multiplies. Kira helped me see that. Kira, the guide from the retreat. He said her name with reverence like it was a holy word. I felt heat crawl up my neck. You met her last weekend, Stanley. He nodded serenely. Exactly. And it was like recognizing my soul in another form. I wanted to laugh or scream. But all I managed was, we've been together 8 years, married for 5. You're saying that means nothing. He gave me a patient smile, the kind you give a child who still believes in fairy tales. Those are just social constructs. We've been asleep in patterns of ownership. Kira says resistance is fear. Resistance, I repeated, incredulous. This isn't about fear, it's about respect. But he was already somewhere else reciting lines that weren't his. If you can't expand with me, you'll hold me back from my highest self. Hold him back. After all the nights I stayed up editing his proposals, the lunches I skipped to help pay off his student loans, I was suddenly the enemy of his enlightenment. The air between us thickened. I couldn't find my voice. He touched my arm, almost pitying. You could come too. Kira's open circles are for everyone. I stared at him, my husband glowing like a convert. No, I said quietly. I think I'll stay right here on Earth. That night, I packed a spare pillow and blanket, walked down the hallway, and closed the door to the guest room behind me. I could hear him still in the living room, humming to some ambient track, whispering affirmations into his phone. The smell of sage seeped under the door. I lay awake, eyes open in the dark, listening to him moving around the house that used to feel like ours. And for the first time since I'd met Stanley Markley, I felt completely alone. The next morning, sunlight crept through the blinds and painted gold lines across the guest room wall. I stared at them for a long time, wondering when my marriage had started to fade between the cracks. Stanley was already gone. His side of the bed in our room looked untouched, like he'd been sleeping elsewhere too. Maybe spiritually he had. When he came home that evening, he looked radiant. That same artificial peace stretched over his face like plastic wrap. He kissed my forehead absently and said, "Kira says we're entering a new vibration phase." I was too tired to ask what that meant. He spent most of the day rearranging the living room. Out went the framed photos, the cozy throw blanket, the record player we'd bought together. In their place, crystals, feathers, and a giant hand-painted sign that read, "Open hearts, open paths." Our apartment, once a warm mess of shared life, now looked like a showroom for a boutique cult. That night he lit another stick of sage, the smoke twisting like ghosts between us. I watched him carefully set the lighter down and fold his hands on his lap. He looked like a man preparing to deliver a sermon. "Alexis," he began softly, "I know this is uncomfortable for you. You're clinging to the old paradigm of love." I exhaled slowly. "Stanley, the old paradigm is called commitment." He smiled in that maddeningly calm way. Commitment doesn't mean possession. It means presence. His tone was so certain it almost sounded rehearsed. Kira says, true love expands without boundaries. There it was again, Kira, the invisible third person living between us. I folded my arms. You've known this woman for 10 days, and now she's your philosopher. His voice sharpened. She's opened my mind. You could learn something from her, like how to throw away a marriage. He sighed, exasperated. See, that's fear talking again. That's your ego resisting evolution. My stomach twisted. He sounded less like my husband and more like a recording. I stood up. You know what this sounds like, Stanley, a sales pitch? He tilted his head, pitying. You always were pragmatic. You crave control, but control kills connection. I stared at him, speechless. You want to live in a box? He continued. Voice rising now. A safe, predictable little box. That's not love, Alexis. That's ownership. It was like watching someone rewrite your history in front of you. Every shared moment, our first apartment, our late-night laughter, the stupid way he used to dance while brushing his teeth, all reduced to evidence of my supposed oppression. I whispered, You're calling everything we built together a cage. He softened, stepping closer. I'm saying, we could evolve it. We can open the relationship, explore connections together. Together, I repeated, almost laughing. So what? You with Kira and me, clapping supportively from the sidelines. It doesn't have to be like that, he said quickly. Kira could guide us. She's very experienced. The implication hit me like ice water. She's experienced, I said flatly. With you. He hesitated too long. His silence said everything. The air felt suddenly too thick to breathe. You met her last weekend, I said, my voice trembling. You've known her less time than it takes to get a passport renewed. And you're ready to burn down our life for her. Stanley's voice dropped calm and cold. Don't reduce this to jealousy. This is spiritual alignment. Kira and I share something you can't understand yet. Something inside me snapped. Yet I said quietly, You mean ever? He opened his mouth to argue, but I lifted a hand. I'm not doing this. I turned and walked to the guest room again. My legs felt like stone, but my chest burned. Behind me I heard him whisper. Kira said this might happen. The ego resists the light at first. I almost laughed. A bitter, humorless sound. In the guest room, I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the wedding photo I hadn't yet taken down. In it, he looked so young, so open, smiling at me, like I was the whole world. Now he smiled that same way, but toward someone else's voice echoing in his head. I didn't cry that night. Not yet. I just lay there numb and listened to the sound of incense burning. In the other room, smoke was whispering through the house like a stranger's breath. Somewhere in the darkness, I realized the truth. The man I'd loved was still alive, but whatever he'd become had already left me behind. The silence after Stanley moved into the guest energy room, his words not mine, was unbearable. He no longer slept beside me, but his presence lingered everywhere, his toothbrush, his mug, his cologne fading on the pillowcase. I told myself it was temporary. Maybe this was just a phase, an obsession he'd outgrow. But obsession has gravity. It doesn't fade. It pulls. The first week I functioned on autopilot. Work gym dinner. Smile when coworkers asked how he was. He's great finding himself. At night I scrolled through our old photos looking for the moment the light in his eyes changed. It was Mia who broke the illusion. She came over one night with a bottle of red wine and the kind of face people wear before delivering bad news. Alexis. She began carefully. You should know. Stanley posted something online. She turned her phone toward me. There he was, my husband, shirtless, cross-legged, in a circle of women in white linen. The caption read, "The Pulse Collective expands gratitude to Kira for opening our hearts." And there, in the corner of the photo, Kira herself, smiling, hand on his shoulder. I felt the air leave my body. How long ago was this yesterday? The comments below were all the same kind of language he'd been spouting: abundance, alignment, energy union. Each word felt like a knife dipped in honey. Mia reached for my hand. Alexis, he's not in control anymore. This looks like a cult. I nodded, but inside I was still trying to compute how the man who once debated mortgage rates with me was now chanting in a meadow about universal oneness. A few days later, Leo called. He didn't bother with sympathy. Alexis rechecked their site. They're fundraising for something called the Sanctuary Project. Guess who donated $5,000? I froze. 5,000. From where your joint account? The one for your house savings. My pulse thudded in my ears. That account was sacred, our future, our anchor. He hadn't even told me. When I logged in, the balance confirmed at $5,000 withdrawn, labeled Donation the Pulse Collective. My hands shook as I stared at the transaction. I felt like someone had stolen not just money, but years. That night, I walked through the apartment like a ghost. The crystals, the incense, the chants, echoing faintly from his laptop, it all felt like I was trespassing in someone else's life. He was at Kira's circle, he said, and wouldn't be home until late. So I sat at the dining table and opened a blank page on my laptop. For months I'd been reacting, crying, arguing, waiting. But that night, something colder and steadier took over. I searched family law constructive abandonment. The next morning I made an appointment with a lawyer. His office was sterile, quiet, almost comforting. He listened as I laid everything out, voice steady, despite the tremor in my hands. My husband has joined a group. They control his finances. I need to protect what's left. He nodded, professional, detached. You can file for dissolution. This qualifies as abandonment. He slid a folder toward me. When you're ready to serve him, sign here. The pen felt heavy in my hand. Signing didn't feel triumphant. It felt like closing a door that had been stuck open too long. Still, when the ink dried, something shifted inside me. The fog lifted. Walking out of that office, the city felt louder, clearer. I wasn't anyone's student wife or spiritual obstacle anymore. Just Alexis Markley, a woman reclaiming the ground beneath her feet. That night, I slept in our Know My bed again. It smelled faintly of sage, but I didn't mind. I opened the window, let the air in, and whispered a quiet promise to myself. You don't need his awakening to wake up. Months passed, and life rearranged itself into a quieter rhythm. I learned to live without Stanley's noise, no more incense smoke creeping under the doors, no more lectures about frequency and alignment. The apartment stopped feeling haunted and started feeling like mine again. I even caught myself humming sometimes while cooking dinner, something I hadn't done since before the Pulse Collective took him. But grief has a strange sense of timing. It doesn't leave when you're ready. It lingers waiting for the smallest reminder. For me, it was a photo. Leo sent it one afternoon, followed by a single message. You should see this. The image was from social media. Stanley standing behind Kira in a group photo. Everyone dressed in cream linen eyes, glassy with devotion. But Stanley didn't look enlightened. He looked thin, pale, exhausted. The caption read, "New Beginnings at the Sanctuary Commune. Gratitude for shedding the old self." My throat tightened. The old self. That was me. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept wondering if he realized what he'd given up: the marriage, the laughter, the stability he used to mock as boring. Part of me wanted to drive out there, shake him awake. The other part just pitied him. Mia noticed my silence during our usual Sunday dinner. Still thinking about him, she asked gently. I nodded, tracing the rim of my wine glass. "He looks sick, Mia, like he's starving for something that isn't food." She sighed. "People like Kira thrive on starving others emotionally, financially, spiritually. She's the sun, and everyone else just burns around her." I smiled faintly. "You should have been the one giving those talks." "Yeah," she said, "but mine wouldn't charge $5,000 a seat." A small laugh escaped me. It felt good, strange, but good. For the first time in months, I realized I was healing not in some cosmic way, just humanly. I went back to yoga, started meeting friends after work, even reactivated my photography page. Normal life rebuilt piece by piece. Then, late one Tuesday, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. The message read, "Alexis, I think I made a mistake. Can we talk? I miss you." My breath caught. I knew that rhythm, that punctuation. It was him. For a long moment, I just stared at the screen. No anger, no hope, just the echo of something that used to matter. My thumb hovered over the reply button. Then I set the phone down. He'd made his choice. He had chosen her, chosen freedom, chosen to mock everything we built together. Now he wanted to come back to the safety he once called a cage. I didn't block him, but I didn't answer either. Some silences speak louder than words. 2 days later, I got the voicemail. His voice was wrecked horse, trembling, stripped of all that faux serenity. "Alexis, please pick up. It's not what I thought. It's chaos. She's not who she said she was. She has other partners. We pay for everything. I have nothing left. Please, I need to come home." For a long time after the message ended, I just sat there listening to the hum of the refrigerator. The same silence that once felt suffocating now felt clean. He had found the abundant love he wanted, and it had devoured him. And now, like a moth with singed wings, he was trying to fly back to the flame he'd once called too dim. I deleted the voicemail. Then I opened my window, breathed in the cool night air, and whispered softly into the quiet. Freedom looks different when no one's clapping for it. The next morning he called again. Then again. Different numbers each time. I ignored them all. But by the fourth attempt, something in me shifted, not out of longing, but finality. I didn't want him haunting my silence anymore. I wanted to close the chapter properly with my own words. So I texted back a single line, "We can talk. Public place. Tomorrow noon." The park near our old apartment was halfway between what used to be our world and mine. Wide open, uncharged ground. I arrived 10 minutes early. Manila folder clutched in my hand, the divorce papers I'd kept sealed for weeks. The sky was soft gray, the air heavy with the smell of cut grass. He came 5 minutes late, and when I saw him walking toward me, my heart didn't break, it just stilled. The man approaching wasn't my Stanley. His shoulders hunched, his hair unkempt, his eyes rimmed red. He looked smaller, like the world had drained him. "Alexis," he said, breathless. He sat down beside me on the bench, hands trembling. For a long time, neither of us spoke. The silence stretched, filled with everything unsaid. Finally, he whispered, "I'm so sorry." I didn't reply. I wanted him to hear the weight of his own words echo back at him. He rubbed his face the way he used to when he was stressed. It was all a lie. Kira, she wasn't guiding anyone. She was using us. She decides who eats, who sleeps who she spends time with. He swallowed. "It's like being owned." A bitter smile flickered at the corner of my mouth. "Ironic, isn't it? You left me to escape ownership." He flinched. Tears welled up in his eyes. "Alexis, I was blind. I just wanted something more, something shiny," I interrupted. "Different, easy." He closed his eyes. I thought I was evolving. I leaned back on the bench, my voice calm, steady. "You didn't evolve, Stanley. You dissolved." He reached for my hand. I pulled it away gently. "I want to come home," he pleaded. "I can fix this. I'll sell the crystals. I'll get therapy, whatever you need. I just want our life back." For a brief, painful second, I saw the man I used to know, the one who made me pancakes on Sundays and wrote bad poetry when he was drunk. But the image was just that, a memory, not a promise. I looked him in the eye. You called our life a cage, I said softly. You said I was keeping you small. Remember? He nodded, shame written across his face. I reached into my bag and took out the manila folder. You were right, Stanley, I said quietly. I am small. I'm small enough to fit into one relationship. Small enough to believe in vows. Small enough to think love means showing up when it's hard. His lips parted. Alexis, please, I place the folder on the bench between us. I choose my smallness, my boundaries, my peace. He stared at the document as if it were something poisonous. When he opened it, his breath hitched. The words, petition for dissolution of marriage, gleamed at the top. He looked up, eyes wet, voice cracking. No, please, don't do this. I stood up. Stanley, I already did this months ago. This is just your copy. For a heartbeat, he didn't move. Then the paper slipped from his hands and fluttered to the ground like a dead leaf. I didn't reach for it. I didn't reach for him. The air between us was clear now. No smoke, no chance, no illusions. Just the quiet truth of what we'd become. Two people who once promised forever, now strangers linked only by what they'd survived. He whispered, Alexis, I don't know how to live without you. I looked at him, really looked at him, and felt nothing but a deep, calm mercy. You'll figure it out, I said. You were always good at finding new paths. And with that, I turned and walked away. No dramatic music, no cinematic glance back. Just the sound of my footsteps on gravel growing fainter with each step. The sunlight broke through the clouds warm against my face. The air smelled like rain and cut grass, simple, ordinary, beautiful. I realized then that peace doesn't come from freedom or chaos. It comes from finally choosing yourself. It's been 6 months since that day in the park. 6 months since I watched Stanley crumble into the man he became. And 6 months since I finally walked away without looking back. You'd think endings would echo, but sometimes they just fade. Now when I wake up, the first thing I hear is the soft hum of the city outside my window. No chants, no affirmations. Just life, mundane, beautiful life. I've redecorated the apartment. The sage stains are gone. The crystals are gone. Even the heavy velvet curtains, he said, blocked energy are gone. The place feels open again, light, imperfect, real. Every Sunday, I make spaghetti carbonara. It's no longer a shared ritual, but mine. I still use too much garlic, and sometimes I burn the pancetta, but it fills the space with a warmth I once thought I'd lost forever. When the scent fills the kitchen, I remember who I am, someone who finds comfort in ordinary things, not cosmic promises. Mia teases me about how peaceful I've become. You're practically a monk now, she said last week as we sat on my balcony with cheap wine. I laughed. No, just someone who's finally bored in the best possible way. She grinned. You always did say you wanted stability. Turns out, I replied, stability was the revolution. Sometimes I still think about Stanley not with anger, but with a kind of detached compassion. He sends the occasional email short and hesitant. I've started therapy. I'm sorry for everything. I never reply. Some things don't need closure twice. One night I stumbled across a photo online. Someone had tagged Kira's name. The Pulse Collective was disbanded. Apparently the authorities got involved. Fraud. Emotional manipulation. A handful of her followers were trying to rebuild their lives. Stanley's name wasn't mentioned, but I didn't need confirmation. He had found his lesson just as I had found mine. I no longer hate what happened. I wouldn't relive it, but I also wouldn't erase it. That kind of pain changes you, but sometimes it chisels you into something stronger. Last week I went to the park again, the same bench where I gave him the papers. The air was soft and full of children's laughter. I sat there quietly tracing the grain of the wood, and for the first time I felt no ghost beside me. Just gratitude. Because peace doesn't announce itself with trumpets. It comes like morning light, slow, steady, filling the corners you thought would stay dark forever. As I got up to leave, a breeze lifted the edge of my scarf. Somewhere someone was playing guitar, a soft, imperfect melody drifting through the trees. And I thought this is what freedom actually sounds like. Not chaos, not rebellion, just calm. Some prisons are made of chaos. Some freedoms are carved from boundaries. And for the first time in years, I was exactly where I was supposed to be, rooted, steady, awake.